Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our study this evening. We're in Genesis chapter 38, and guys, I'm using a new microphone, so I would be grateful if you could comment to let me know that I'm coming through loud and clear. So happy to have Cheryl, David with us, Rena, Chuck, and we also have Felice and Ben, and my brother Steve, Annie, and my niece Lydia is joining us for the first time. Hello, Lydia. And let me see, we have Gary, and I think that's it so far. So let me know, can you hear me okay? Cheryl says loud and clear, so that makes me very, very happy. Cheryl says just 12 more chapters to go. That's right. And this is study number 90 of 120. So we actually have 30 transmissions to go. And I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Tonight, we're going to see kind of a tragic story. And it's interesting because we started the series concerning Joseph. And then all of a sudden, we're switching to another scene. It's Judah. And then when we finish Judah, here, we're going to go back to Joseph's story. So it's kind of like a little parenthesis here. You'll see that as we continue on. So allow me to, first of all, let me say what a wonderful weekend we had together as a family. There were 15 of us, I believe, at my brother Steve's house. He let us all make pizza in his pizza oven, and then he served us brisket afterwards. Delicious, everything. But the most special time was us getting together, just reminiscing about our loved ones that had gone before, like my sister Sherry, like my sister-in-law Shirley, like my brother-in-law Sylvan, and now, more recently, my brother-in-law, Reuben, and my sister, Susie, and then our brother, Larry, passed away, and Michael, too. So many that have gone on. And I shared with everybody that, I pray often. Every time I see a beautiful sunset, I remember to pray for my siblings and their spouses and their children, like you, Lydia, and even our nieces and nephews' children as well. And now they're having children. And so we remember to pray. And I pray especially for their salvation, because there's nothing more important than seeing our family forever, for eternity with the Lord. And so that's what I shared. And so far, everyone who has died has had the opportunity to listen to the gospel message, to pray, to receive Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And the Lord gives us these words of hope as we continue on. And so I'm hoping that all of my brothers and sisters and our entire family are ready to meet the Lord when that day comes. So let me go ahead and pray. Father, I thank you for a wonderful weekend. Thank you for bringing Pilar and I back safely, and so that we can do this transmission this evening. I pray that you would minister to everyone who is listening today, that you would speak to us, that you would give us insights into your word and show us how to apply these truths to our lives today. Father, I ask this in Jesus' name. We love you. We adore you. We thank you. Amen. Okay, so we're going to start in Well, actually, with a story from the New Testament, Matthew chapter 22, I'm going to read to you starting at verse 23. The Sadducees have a question for Jesus. And it says, the same day the Sadducees who say there is no resurrection. That's why they're called Sadducees, because they're sad. You see, they do not believe in the resurrection. They came to Jesus and asked him, saying, Teacher, Moses said that if a man dies having no children, his brother should marry his wife and raise up offspring for his brother. And we're going to take a look at what Moses said exactly in a little bit. Now, there were with us 7 brothers. I'm the last of 7 brothers, but in our family, we have both boys and girls. The first died, and after he had married, and having no offspring, left his wife to his brother. Likewise, the second also died, and then the third, even all the way to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, and these guys don't believe in the resurrection, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had her. Jesus answered and said to them, You are silly, you are mistaken, not knowing the scriptures nor the power of God. And we must know the scriptures, we must know the power of God. And so, interesting story. 7 brothers, the first one died, and the second one should be marrying his widow. And the way that they did this, and the reason that they did this, is so that when the widow died, she wouldn't be alone, obviously, so she will be taken care of. But also, this would take care of the inheritance of the brother. And it would take care of, the land and their belongings and things like this. This was God's way of taking care of those widows and continuing on the family name. And so I can just imagine the second brother thinking, now, do I really want to marry my sister-in-law? And if he were to die, then the third one would do it. And this is the way that God set it up in Old Testament times. That's what we're going to be taking a look at this evening in the book of Genesis. But before we do, let's go to the book of Deuteronomy chapter 25, and we're going to see where God says this in the law. He says, if brothers dwell together and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside of the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her, take her as his wife, and perform the duty of the husband's brother to her. And then in verse 5 it says, and it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. So this is God's way of taking care of the widows, of extending the family line, of taking care of the inheritance. And this was very important in the nation of Israel. We don't practice this in our society today, but they certainly did practice this in biblical times. And that's what we're going to be taking a look at today. Now, wasn't that silly of the Sadducees to say that there were 7 brothers and each one of them had the same wife? They were making this up. They were trying to trick Jesus. They were trying to, come up with a question. Can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it up? Silly, foolish things. Let's take a look now at our study in the book of Genesis. Genesis chapter 38, starting in verse 1. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers, and he visited a certain Adullamite, whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite, whose name was Shua, and he married her and went into her. A few things from these verses. Number 1, it says Judah departed from his brothers. And this, guys, is where we're very vulnerable. When we separate ourselves from our Christian family, When we are all alone, when we isolate ourselves, that's when we start making bad decisions. We're not accountable to anyone, and we do very, very foolish things. And what was the foolish thing that Judah did? He married a Canaanite woman whose name was Shua. And she was an idolater. She was a pagan. She did not do what was right. And you remember, this is Judah who is doing this. And if you remember, Judah, whose name means praise, is going to be the father of the tribe of the line of the Messiah. Jesus, the Messiah, is going to be born as a descendant of Judah. And here we see him marrying a pagan woman who has no care or concern at all for Jehovah, the God of Israel. Let's continue with the story. It says in the next verse, my computer's slow for some reason. There we go. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Can you guys say She conceived again and bore another son and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and she called his name Selah. He was at Chisbev when she bore him. And so Judah, with this pagan woman, this Canaanite woman, had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. Now, a lot of time is going by, and it's time for these 3 sons to get married. Well, the oldest one at least. So Judah feels a responsibility to find a wife for his son Now, it's interesting. He didn't wait for Jacob to find him a wife. He went out and did it by himself. But he felt this responsibility of doing it for his son because he made mistakes by marrying this Canaanite woman. Well, let's continue. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of God, and the Lord killed him. The Bible doesn't tell us exactly what his wickedness was, but we might assume something, that if his mother was a Canaanite, she was a pagan, and she was an idolatrous woman, she probably didn't want her children growing up learning about Jehovah God, about the God of Israel, and being circumcised and things like this. And so that's what happens when you have an unequally yoked marriage. When you marry an unbeliever and you're a believer, the children are the ones who are going to have to suffer. They're going to side either with mom or dad. I believe says like my mom does, not like my dad does. That could be the reason why he was a wicked man and the Lord slew him, because he did not know the Lord. He did not honor the Lord. So he died. So according to this, it's called a Levirate marriage arrangement in the book of Deuteronomy that we saw, his brother should marry him. And that's what we're going to see here. And Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her and raise up an heir to your brother." Now, an heir, or the son to the brother, even though it's your son, it actually belongs to your brother, according to this arrangement. And so Onan is now supposed to marry his brother's wife to have a child through her. But you know what? Onan, just like his brother, hates God, and hates the rules that God established. And look what he does in the next verse 9. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his, and it came to pass when he went into his brother's wife that he emitted on the ground. He spilled his semen on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. He did what was wicked, and the thing which he did displeased the Lord, so he killed him again. He killed him also. And so 2 of Judah's 3 sons have died. He only has one son left. And what does um, the law say? That Tamar, should marry Judah's youngest son. Now, if 2 of them have already died, I think Judah is thinking, I don't know if I want to give my last son to this woman. Of course, it wasn't Tamar's fault that these 2 men had died. It's because they did wickedly and God judged them and God smote them. Well, verse 11 says, Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown. For he said, lest he also died like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So what Judah did was a very callous thing, was a bad thing. He sent his daughter-in-law away. He sent her back home to be with her family. And really, he had the responsibility to take care of her, being the daughter-in-law. Well, the last son, Selah, was too young to be married, too young to father a child. And so he told her, stay with your parents until my youngest son is old enough. But inside he was thinking, I hope this just blows over. I hope that she never marries my last son, Selah, because I don't want the same thing to happen to him as what happened to his 2 older brothers, that the Lord killed them. So he was thinking maybe she'll marry somebody else, or maybe just she'll forget. So he was trying to deny his responsibility towards his daughter-in-law, and this is a very, very bad thing. The next verse says, Now, in the process of time, this means that many years have gone by, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shearers at Timnah, and he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And so an Adullamite is a Canaanite. He lives in the area called Adullam. Interesting, King David later on will live in one of the caves of Adullam. But it's sad here because Judah lost his wife. She died, and probably died very young as well. But he was comforted, and he went up to shear sheep. That's what they would do, those shepherds. They would take the fleece from the sheep. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear sheep. So Tamar comes up with a plan. She says, so she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself and sat in an open place, which was on the way to Timnah, for she saw that Shelah was grown and she was not given to him as a wife. So Judah was not fulfilling his side of the bargain. He said that he would give his 3rd son, Selah, to her, but he never did. Time went by. The kid grew up. He should have been Tamar's wife, but none of it. And so she is taking the reins in her hands, and she's going to do something. She took off her widow's clothing, and she put on the clothing of a harlot. Let's see what happens. When Judah saw her sitting by the road, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face. Then he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come into you, for he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. Uh-oh. So she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, I will send a young goat from the flock. So she said, okay, will you give me a pledge until you send it? And my computer's slow. Then he said, what pledge shall I give you? So she said, give me your signet ring, give me your cord, and give me your staff that is in your hand. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. She conceived by her father-in-law. Oh my goodness, because the father-in-law didn't want to give his son, his last son, Selah, to her as a husband. So we see some hanky-panky going on here. We see some incest happening. We see some immorality. We see lots of injustice, lots of sin. And who is at the middle of it? Judah, causing her to take things into her own hands because he refuses to give her his last son, Selah. And she's pregnant now. Well, let's see what the next verse says. So she arose and went her way and laid aside her veil and put on her garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. So the men of the place said there was no harlot in that place. Then Judah said, well, let her take them for herself, lest we be shamed. For I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And so he was fulfilling his his part of the bargain to give her this goat in payment for this immoral, illicit sexual relationship with her. And it came to pass about 3 months later that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. You know, after 3 months, it's hard to hide that growing baby in your tummy. And she had the signs that she was a pregnant woman. But it wasn't with Selah, obviously. Who was the father of this baby? Well, we're going to continue the story tomorrow, okay? Because we have lots of interesting things to say and to put together. So I hope that you'll be back. But a couple of points of application from our study today. Number one, don't distance yourself from your Christian family. Isolation can lead to poor decisions and spiritual decline when there's no network of accountability. I'm talking about Christians who have a Christian family, who go to church, who all of a sudden disappear. They go on their own and they start doing things. They make poor decisions and they grow cold in their relationship with the Lord. You know, this is the reason why the Apostle Paul said, don't forsake the gathering together of the believers. There's an exhortation from the scriptures that we should be in fellowship with each other. We should be in community with each other. We should be going to church with each other because you help people to be accountable and other people are accountable to you. I think I said that twice. You need to be accountable to other people. And so that's why we are in church. That's why we're in fellowship. That's why we speak to each other and ask each other how we can pray for each other. Because sometimes we struggle. Sometimes things don't go well for us. Sometimes we're about to make a poor decision. And our brothers and sisters in the Lord are there to help us and say, don't make that decision that's going to take you away from the Lord. Don't do it. In Judah's case, he isolated himself from his brothers and he went looking for a wife among the Canaanites, a pagan woman, an idolatrous woman who did not believe in or share the faith with Judah concerning the God of Israel. He made a terrible mistake. And what are the consequences of this foolishness? 2 of his sons died, and his daughter-in-law, Tamar, was put into very, very difficult situation. And now she's pregnant, and Judah has no idea who the father was. Who has she laid down with? Who has she slept with? And so there's a lot of conspiracy and anger and frustration. And probably Judah is thinking, well, I'm glad that she did that, because that nullifies my commitment to have to give her Selah. We're going to see how that turns out tomorrow. Number 2, Judah married a pagan Canaanite woman. Such unions rarely end well. Sadly, those who suffer most are the children. The result, death, tragedy, and loss. And that's what we see here, Judah marrying this woman. And the children had to decide, am I going to grow up to follow the God of my fathers, the God of Judah and Jacob and Isaac and Abraham? Or am I just going to be a pagan and do whatever I want to do, live a rebellious life, not be accountable to anyone? And so the children are the ones having to suffer the consequences of their parents' disobedience. It's really sad and tragic. Well, yeah, it's the kids. We need to consider the kids before we get into the wrong relationship, becoming unequally yoked with an unbeliever. Number 3, God sees hidden sin. Judah's sons, and Onan, acted wickedly before God, and God judged them. Nothing escapes God's notice. We don't know exactly what these 2 men did. I don't know. It could have been that they committed murder. It could have been that they were robbers. It could be that they just despised the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Judah, and so they did evil in God's sight, and so they were not allowed to live any longer. Now, we trust that God knows what he's doing in these cases. But again, the thing is, God sees the hidden sins. He sees the sin that Judah's sons, and Onan, were doing. And God was the one who judged them. And God is a just judge, and he judges fairly. And so they were removed. Their lives were gone, because they did not fear the Lord. And that's what we want to do. We want to have a holy and righteous fear of the Lord. Let me say hello to everyone. David says, good evening, everyone. I don't know how much I can relate to this title, but I have a feeling, well, I'll relate to Judah. You're absolutely right. He sinned, and he sinned much. Gary says, I was thinking the same thing, David. Hope everyone is doing well and will be with us this evening. We are, Gary. David says, hi, Gary. Hope you've been doing well. And Gary says, doing okay and getting better as the days go by. That's really good news. Steve says, hello, everyone. I'm at Sister Annie's house with our niece, Lydia. We are in Santa Maria for a few days visit. We are excited to listen to Pastor John today to study the book of Genesis, session 90. Thank you, Steve. David says hi to Steve. How fun that was that your niece is with you tonight. And I'm very, very happy about that as well. Cheryl says, good evening, David, Gary, and Steve. And Ben and Felice say that they've joined us too. David says hi to Cheryl. Good to see you. And Cheryl says, Judah is in trouble tonight. He certainly is. David says hi to Ben and Felice. Happy you're both here. You know what, David, you bless me so much. Getting in there as a young man, greeting everyone, and even letting my class know when I'm going to be a few minutes late. Thank you for all that you do to serve in our little fellowship here. Cheryl says, hi, Ben and Felice. And Chuck Andrews says, hey, all. So good to have you check with us. And Rena, too. Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. Blessings to you all. Blessings to you. David says hi to Chuck and Rena. And Cheryl says just 12 more chapters to go. That's right. And we'll finish this chapter 38 tomorrow. And Cheryl says she's hearing loud and clear. And Annie says, hi, everyone. Love from Annie. Thank you, Annie. And, Annie was telling me how much she loves and appreciates everyone's friendships and their kind comments. David says, we hear you well. All right. Chuck says, loud and clear. And David says, hi, Annie. And Cheryl says, kinsman redeemer. That's right. We'll talk about that tomorrow, Cheryl. And Kristen says, hello, family. And Annie says hi to David. And did I tell you, David, that Annie has a son named David? Thought that was interesting. And David says, hi, Kristen. Glad you could be here tonight. Okay, I need to go. I love you all. I look forward to